Welcome back. This is my third episode that I'm filming from Sync. I wish I could film more, but this is my last conversation here. Sync is the event that's held here in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, where the attempt really is to create a better interaction between humanity and the digital world in a way that basically allows us to get maybe the benefits of technology with more focus on our well-being. One of my favorite events, to be honest, the incredible thinkers and speakers that come together to discuss such important topics is just a wealth that I see rarely as I travel the world. Today, I'm hosting an incredible thinker about our children. Dr. Michael Rich is a pediatrician, and he's a child health researcher, but also a child media specialist. I don't even know exactly what that means. He is the founder and director of the Boston Children's Digital Wellness Lab. So his focus, not only as a doctor, but also as a filmmaker and as a researcher, is to put his 50 years of experience behind creating interactions for our children that are enriching, valuable, but also conscious of their well-being when they're looking at little screens and digital devices. So I asked Michael before we started this recording, if there are any specific topics you want to focus on, and his answer was children. Well, let's just talk about our children. And his view was that they are the future, but we're not giving them an easy future to navigate. So I think that would be, first of all, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for your positivity and optimism and massive wisdom, honestly, that you shared so far in the conference. But I agree with you. I think we're messing up. I think we're giving them a very difficult world to navigate. So maybe we should start from there.
I would say we have messed up, but we don't have to keep messing up.
That's a good place to start. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
In the sense that there is no purpose in looking to the past, what has happened in the past. We have been imperfect. We will always be imperfect, but we've got to keep trying to perfect ourselves and our world. And, I think that if we say we've done a bad job or it's terrible for them, there's a sense of hopelessness to that I don't accept. I don't think we are hopeless. I don't think we are helpless. But we cannot continue to take the easy path. We have to be more thoughtful, not just for our world now, but for the world that it will build. And these young people who are coming up now are going to be running this world.
Correct.
And what we owe to them is a sense of belonging, of purpose, of being heard and having agency, and curiosity and creativity to rethink this rather than, oh my God, it's a mess, right?
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing. It worries me when I hear cynicism from adolescents in particular who are on the cusp of taking over the world. And I say, no, you can't think that way. Don't give up.
It is an uprising trend, if you think about it. There is that disconnect. I mean, generational disconnect is always there. I mean, probably I look back at my father's generation and I go like, they don't get the world. Mm-hmm. But you can easily see that most of the talk happening with younger generations is cynicism. Is that, how do you want me to navigate this? Where is my interest in all of this? Why do you think that is?
I think both because their older generation is cynical too.
That's correct.
Right, and they're learning, by example, but also because the older generation is cynical, and because the older generation has in their fear overprotected them in some way. They don't feel they have the strength or the agency or, frankly, the ability to make things better. And so why not just be negative? Why not just see this as a dystopian world? And be, as a pediatrician, an occupational hazard is optimism, right?
Okay.
Right?
That's a good way of saying it.
Right?
Yeah.
And I see these kids, even kids who are, in some ways, who've been given up on by society, as pure potential.
Of
Right?
course.
And much of society looks at them as just a pain, and difficult. And, one of the interesting things that I will do when I'm with an adolescent in particular, and their parents are out of the room, is I say, what can your parents do better? And almost always the first thing out of their mouth is, pay more attention to me.
I know that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly, these are the same parents who say, he never talks, he never tells us what's going on, he's sullen, he's nonverbal, she only has, these moods and doesn't talk to me. The kids do want their parents to be present
so where
in
is
their
it going
lives.
wrong?
Because the parents give up. The parents see them being nonverbal or moody, and they give up. I hate to say it, but the other thing is the parents have issues with their devices too. And the parents are staring at their phones instead of looking at and listening to their kids, even when their kids are sitting in silence. We need to listen to them because that's telling us something too.
What do you mean? The silence itself is telling us something?
I think we need to be comfortable being silent together,
I know.
taking a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
And one of my big things is we've got to bring back boredom.
I cannot agree more.
Right? Because boredom is the crucible of curiosity, creativity, imagination, innovation, not just because it gives you that mind space to do it in, but because that's a little uncomfortable, right? And so,
I wrote about that in my last book, the idea of digital. The reason for our digital addiction, in my view, is a form of an emotional discomfort. Prime among which is boredom. And boredom is actually a very positive emotion because it basically tells you I'm underwhelmed with the world. So I might as well create a world that, I'm excited about. So
Absolutely.
creativity is a result. I jokingly say that the boredom in the caveman and women years wasn't addressed with Netflix. It was addressed by chipping stones to create weapons or doing something, right?
or having sex.
Or that's also very, very, a very good solution.
way to pass the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
I will push back on something that you said, though, is I don't think the word addiction is accurate in this case.
To devices. Tell me more.
To devices. And the reason for that is, first of all, I've had this clinic for interactive media and internet disorders at Boston Children's Hospital for 7+ years now. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds of kids who've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of gaming or social media, pornography, or what we call information binging, which is YouTube, Reddit, Quora, just following threads.
Hold on, I do all of those but porn. So what? I have a problem.
Or at least you acknowledge doing all of them but porn.
I do actually. So I no. I'm an avid against porn just for the abuse of the.
Absolutely.
It's a very unethical part. I mean, I understand people cannot be off it, but some people, have to consider the negative impact this brings to others, not to yourself. It's, it's just a big thing for me. But the idea is that I am, interestingly, always between that constant hunger for knowledge where I binge 3 hours almost every day of YouTube videos now because sadly that replaced my book reading. So it's interestingly a more efficient way to get knowledge around especially current events.
Right.
So an attempt to understand everything that's happening in artificial intelligence or everything that's happening in the geopolitical world that we live in, the economics of the world we live in. A book is not as updated as, a podcast conversation or a YouTube conversation that happened a week ago.
Yes.
And so this to me has, and I don't feel addicted, but definitely it is difficult to resist.
Well, let me sort of sketch for you what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We've seen hundreds of kids We have yet to see one that didn't have an underlying psychological discomfort, if you will, that was driving these behaviors.
Correct. Yeah.
We have seen one or more of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, particularly in boys who fall into the gaming
Yeah.
thing. Social anxiety, more prevalent in girls and on social media. Autism spectrum disorder, and depression. So we actually say that a SAD patient, which is ADHD, social anxiety, autism, depression, are essentially all of our patients. Now,
Wow.
so what that tells me is, first of all, the problem is not the device. The problem is not the platform or the application, but they are seeking out comfort from it. They're seeking a sense of not just distraction, but also of mastery. Imagine a kid with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder who spends their entire school day feeling like they can't keep up, feeling that they're not paying attention. They can't even pay attention to the conversations in the playground. They go home and they sit down at a first-person shooter, and not only are they incredibly good at it, they're usually better at it than so-called neurotypical kids. I use that word neurotypical with quotes because I hate it.
Why do you hate it?
Because how do we define typical?
Oh yes, 100%. That's
If you're like me, you're
Totally.
normal.
Yeah.
If you're not like me, you're abnormal, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I actually see us all as neurodiverse.
Exactly.
Right? Just in different ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And-
No two people are the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see ADHD actually as
A plus.
normal variant.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, when we were hunter-gatherers and we crawled out of the cave in the morning in search of food and desiring not to become someone else's food,
Yeah.
distractibility was protective. And so we pass down those skills generation to generation until one generation is told to sit down, shut up, and listen to the teacher, right?
What's
And
up,
it does not
people?
work. Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet they get into a first-person shooter game and they're really good.
Yeah.
Right? Because all those skills are coming to the fore again.
So it's quite interesting if I can summarize this. It's a basic. So when we talk about ADHD, and I am an avid, sort of, I caution people of the diagnosis, because by calling it a diagnosis, you are assuming that it is a disease or a defect when it isn't. It's just a different approach to doing things.
Yes.
That is very useful in some context, right? And I think the reality is that it's not that there is a rise of ADHD. There was a change of context, is what you're describing.
A change of environment.
A change of environment.
And
right?
environmental demands.
Yeah.
Right?
So basically, you're a very normal human. Let's not say typical. You're normal in every way. You have a
Yes.
skill set that's very valuable, but it's not valuable in this context anymore, in this environment anymore. And so we diagnose it and say, let's cure it for you. Here are a couple of pills, pay us $1.
Right. And I think we should value diversity in
100%.
neurodiversity as well as we do in diversity in ethnicity and language
Exactly.
and religion. All of that, we should embrace it and see it as enriching our lives as opposed to
That is
being
so correct.
other.
Yeah,
Something
absolutely.
to other.
Yeah.
So, and the other side of it is we aren't seeing kids for whom everything is okay, who the moment they get onto, a Nintendo Switch or something like that, go down the rabbit hole. Millions and millions of kids play video games or on social media, et cetera, and don't get into trouble. Finally, to me, the word addiction, first of all, is not it's not a medical term at all. But if we think about it, it's use of a pleasurable but unnecessary substance or behavior that continues despite negative consequences. And our therapeutic goal is abstinence. Stop drinking alcohol, stop using cocaine, whatever. With interactive media, which is the issue here, we can't abstain from it. This is a necessary thing in our day and age. We need to have it for school, for work, for communication, for connection with friends, etc. So we see this as much more akin to binge eating disorder. which is eating to comfort other things, that your depression, your sadness, whatever. We don't tell them to stop eating.
That's so
right.
That's very accurate. Yeah.
They need to eat while self-regulating that eating, and that's the same thing that we move toward with CIMAID, with the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. And so the final thing is that I worry about the word addiction is, first of all, no parent looks at their kid and says, my kid's a junkie, my kid is addicted, until they're so far down the rabbit hole that they look for all the world like that, staying up all night, not going to school, things of that nature. But when we think about addiction, it is a way of shirking our responsibility for our behavior. Alcohol did it to me. Heroin did it to me. I can't help it, right? And so we actually call this problematic interactive media use because it focuses on the behavior. It does not focus on a certain technology like smartphones or social media, because it all works that way. What they're craving is the interactivity. Even with an NPC, with a non-playable character or a bot, they feel that makes them feel that they are in the world. They make a difference. They're making a change. So it's really interesting. And by the way, take half an hour of those 3 hours you're scrolling on YouTube, and go outside and just.
I do that too.
Look at the the clouds.
I do that too.
Okay,
I mean,
good,
it's interesting because believe it or not, I'm not the kind of person that will wake up in the morning and work 9 to 5, right? My life is entirely mine. When I work, being in a conference like this or recording slow-mo or whatever, it's several hours a day. But not every day, and so most of my life is a curiosity and a research on topics that I find really intriguing and important and timely. And so you can look at those hours, and I actually force myself to do them, believe it or not. You can look at those hours as my research time. Right. And because the world is so fast paced, I have to do it in a digital medium, not in a book like I used to in the past. Having said that, it is interestingly tiring at the end of those hours, right? It's very different than a book. So if I spend 3 hours in a book, I come out energized and really inspired to do more, honestly.
Yes.
When I'm doing 3 hours of research on YouTube, which I have to say is my favorite social platform ever, because I can tell it what I want, it exhausts me. It really takes a lot out of me. It's sort of, to be able to concentrate and focus there is almost not human. And I don't know why that is.
Well, this relates to something very interesting that I've discovered, which is when the pandemic happened, overnight we took our clinic from all in person to all virtual, all telehealth on Zoom. Two interesting things happened. One is, before we made that change, we would have had about a 25 to 30% no-show rate on new patients, because the parents would wuss out and wait till the night before or the morning of to tell the kid, we're going to take you to Boston Children's Hospital and he's going to take away your games or something of that nature. And the kid would say, no way, I'm not going.
It's
right?
a big fit,
I'm not getting in the car. When we went to do this on Zoom, our no-show rate dropped to 0.
Oh, wow.
Because they feel comfortable and confident and masterful in that environment.
That's so interesting.
Here's the other thing that happened. I found that I was completely shattered at the end of a day, just exhausted.
Yes.
Because I realized that when you are in physical space with each other, you're picking up a lot more than just the image and the sound. You're picking up vibes. You're picking up body language. You're picking up just, something in the room where when someone is sad or someone is confused or et cetera. And we have to decode that from this two-dimensional image and the sound coming out of the...
Yeah.
And
it takes way more effort.
Absolutely. It's exhausting. And take another step. After one of these days, I came out of the hospital exhausted, kind of wrung out. I often feel like I'm giving these kids soul transfusions, just because they're so desperate, they're so in need of whatever, they're sad, they're anxious. So I walk out of the hospital, I turn right toward where my car was parked, and there was a brilliant sunset.
Oh.
And all of those cares, all that exhaustion just fell away. You know how I'm in touch with nature, I'm in touch with Mother Earth. And I looked around me, and everyone on the street was doing this. No one else saw it. And I'm sitting there saying, that's so sad. We've narrowed our world, we've shrunk our world. And in many ways, we have turned over our curiosity and imagination that comes out of boredom to whatever happens to be online, right? YouTube is a great place to get information, but are you absolutely sure it's all true? Are you, it is curated, right, by someone else as well as by you, because you can't possibly see everything that's uploaded.
Yeah.
So there is a curation process that goes into that algorithm. But, how do we re-inject a sense of cognitive dissonance in what we are accepting online? And I'm not saying that to criticize you. I'm saying that as a dilemma that we all need to struggle with.
So let's get to the root causes of this. The idea that I was actually chatting with someone, again, admitting my faults here. I go through dips and rises of interactions with my devices. On one extreme, for example, I do 40 days of silence every year where I have minimal, like I can't say I completely drop my devices, but I limit them to 20 minutes a day in the first, 40 minutes a day in the first week, 20 minutes a day in the second week. And then sometimes I go for a week without a device at all, and so on. And it's a wonderful experience. But on the other hand, sometimes, especially when I'm traveling like this, there's so much to catch up on. And I made this, stupid promise to always respond to my followers on social media as much as I can. I can't do it anymore. But then I realized that most of the time, habit-wise, my drive back to an airport or my drive from an airport, I don't even notice the streets at all. I literally do not know where I am from the airport to the hotel. And, where's the joy of traveling if that's how it is, especially if you're in a new place, right?
You're just following the GPS.
And I'm not even driving. No, I'm normally driven. I'm just looking at my just looking at my phone, basically.
I see, yeah.
Answering messages and so on. And I have to admit to you that idea of wasting those experiences that I might never have it ever again. There are cities that I know for a fact it's not likely that I'll ever visit again. Is just puzzling for me, because in all honesty, there is more joy to be found in being in the real world. And in all honesty, there is no rush in answering those messages. And in all honesty, from an ROI, a return on investment point of view, I'm really getting the worst return on investment. But it's still somehow unmanageable. Somehow it just becomes a habit.
Yeah. I will exponentially increase the anxiety around that.
Go for
which is, if you feel that anxiety about not seeing a new city or a new place, think about not seeing your 2-year-old.
Correct.
Who will never be 2 year olds.
I know that for a fact.
Right. These are precious, precious times. And we've lost kind of our mooring in a sense of what's important.
Yeah.
And we are attracted like moths to the flame, to the latest bright, shiny thing. And when you really think about it, how many of those emails really matter? How many of them really matter?
Yeah.
And
in comparison to someone's child or loved one, none do. Yeah.
And much as you would, like to be in touch with your followers, is that relationship giving enough back to you? Are you getting your ROI on that relationship is the question, right? It's no criticism of them as people, but it is such an attenuated relationship. It's such a weak relationship compared to being in the same space with a toddler
Mm.
who wants to show you something in a book, right?
There seems to be, I mean, if we talk about kids specifically, there seems to be things to be learned and done for the child, but also lots of things to be learned and done on the parents' side.
Absolutely.
Can we discuss a few of those?
Absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, instead of seeking the latest killer app, we should develop what I call our killer bees. Those killer bees are: be mindful in our use of screens, and actually in turning them off when they are not the best tool for the task. Be balanced in our screen versus non-screen time. We can no longer do that with screen time limits, because I would argue we can't even measure screen time anymore, because we move in and out of screens so fluidly. How many hours or minutes did you spend in front of a screen yesterday? I couldn't tell you, and I study this stuff because we don't use it the same way we did in the era of television, when you watched a program and turned it off.
Yeah.
We're in and out all the time. They're in every space we're in. They're in our pockets or on our wrists. So instead of saying I'm going to have screen time limits, I suggest that we have minimal non-screen time in a day, which you're doing already, right? Which is really important.
Hold on. Did you guys get this? This is a very, very important tip in my mind, that, measuring screen time is not the answer anymore, because honestly, if you look at my day to day, other than the time when I was recording a podcast, I was constantly on my screen. Even if I'm talking to someone,
right.
I'm still in the back of my mind trying to respond to someone on WhatsApp, and then rushing to the bathroom, and then just checking if I got that message, and so on. So reality is, the answer is the opposite. It's not to measure your screen time, it's to measure your non-screen time, which has to be almost ritualistic. It's like there is, and I simply, because my co-author Alice on Unstressable will say, have a phone graveyard, put your phone somewhere. I don't have that, because I have my phone with me all the time. The only way to do it is to literally switch the damn thing off and start measuring, if I spent an hour without it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Turn it off and put it in another room.
Yeah, exactly.
Put it in a place you can't see it. Because seriously, what you do when you can see it is you wonder what's going on it.
Exactly.
You're missing, right? So I've got two more killer bees for you. And this is an important one around your child or others you're with. Be present.
Yes.
When you're with them and you're on a phone, you're not present.
100%.
You're not there for them. And then you probably saw this one coming, finally. Be bored.
I love that one.
Embrace boredom, because it will make you a richer, more creative, more curious person.
You have no idea. I mean, Michael, I told you about my silent retreats. Most creative time ever. Because by 4 p.m., when you've been sitting in nature for the last 4 hours, and, somehow you're like, itching for a Netflix series or a video game or those moments when you basically tell your mind, we're not going to do that. Your mind works and suddenly goes like, oh, remember that thing we've been reflecting on for the last 6 years? Here is something that I want to share with you. Yes. It's those moments of boredom that make a massive difference.
Yes, I have a dear friend and colleague who, with her family for more than 12 years now, has observed a digital Sabbath.
I love that. So all of
24 hours a day, 24 hours of every week, they put it all away. She's a filmmaker. She's a web designer. She's a creative person in the world of screens, and she finds that it makes her creativity greater, her energy greater, and it lowers our hyperstimulation. And we're able to sense the small things, the delicate things, the ephemeral things, much better than when we are staring into that demanding screen.
And to do it together with ones that you love is actually a brilliant idea.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the interesting things is, even though we all really depended on screens during the pandemic lockdown, she and her family felt it was an oasis in anxiety for them to have that, to continue it through the pandemic, and just know that that was time they had with each other. and and her kids are wonderful, and she feels enriched by it, as opposed to deprived.
For sure. I mean, the challenge, if you really think about it, is that we've mixed. There is value that comes from those devices, like you rightly said. We cannot completely remove them. So, if you decide that next Sunday I'm not going to touch my phone, but you're expecting a delivery, or you want to, order food or whatever, or your kids are doing something fun and you have to just switch on and take a photo.
Yeah.
It seems that there is almost an impossibility to disconnect altogether, but actually it's possible. Actually,
yes.
I mean, fine. You can basically make sure that no deliveries are organized on that day and that you cook that day, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you think of all the photos we take, right?
That's another one.
How many times do you go back to them?
Never ever.
But the photos you take here, they last.
Yeah.
They last.
Yeah.
In fact,
the memories.
one of the things I talk about in my book and to my patients is we have to observe 3 M's of taking care of things, which is model the behavior you want to see in your kids, because they listen to 1% of what we say and about 100% of what we do. Mentor them in the use of these devices and applications. So the reason I use the term mentor is mentors learn as much from the mentee as the mentee learns from the mentor.
Correct.
And a lot of parents won't sit down with their kid and play a video game or explore social media or whatever because they don't feel comfortable being the student. They don't feel comfortable not knowing something about it. In fact, I've had parents tell me, I'm much more comfortable with the sex talk than the internet talk.
What do you mean?
Because parents always like, oh, my kid's nearing puberty, we got to do the sex talk.
Yeah.
I think it's because whether correctly or not, they believe they know something about sex, but they are fearful that they don't know enough about the internet.
Wow.
Right. So they really don't want to go there. And as a result, many kids just are basically free range online because their parents aren't engaged with them in their digital lives. And so I think that's really important. And it brings up the 3rd M, which is monitor them. That doesn't mean be in their face or in their digital space all the time, because that's what parents say. I don't have the time, and I'm checking out. And the kids say, I don't want you in my space. It's private. But the reality is that to a 13-year-old, privacy means so mom and dad can't see. Right? They're oblivious to the rest of the world, which are going to do much more harmful things to them. But ultimately, if you have their usernames and their passwords and you can monitor them, their behavior is different. Right? It's just like random drug testing in the workplace, right? If you know as a worker that you could be asked for urine at any time, you're not going to be smoking weed, right? Because it puts your job at risk. So the same thing happens with kids. But here are the goodies. If you can observe the 3 M's, even partially, you can reach to a kind of mastery of these screens for the kids. And mastery means using them effectively, purposefully, and turning them off when they're not the best tool for the job, and making memories. I argue, for all the time, for example, you spend on YouTube, how much of it do you remember with as much poignancy, with as much power as just a moment with a child or a moment with a loved one of some kind? We make memories from our real life experiences. Those experiences on screen are relatively attenuated.
That's very true. Huh?
Yeah.
Nobody ever looks back and says, "Oh, I remember that time when I was watching YouTube 3 years ago."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
we're just sort of let it flow over us, and there are interesting things in it that catch our interest, etc. And we may put them away somewhere and may be able to recall them, but the experience isn't remembered. It's not making memories of the experience. Human interaction is so much richer.
Yeah, I'm remembering the times when my kids were kids, basically. I have to say they didn't have smart devices with them all the time. It was mid 90s basically. And yeah, we would be driving home every weekend after lunch, and we would play songs. Everyone would pick a song. So the four of us, my wife, ex-wife now, and my two kids, and then we all four of us would vote on which song did we like most. And which it's very silly when you really think about it. It's just everyone picks a song that's on their mind.
Yeah.
But the memories we have from this, and the idea of sometimes when I drive with Aya now through the same spot, and she says, remember when you won with that song in that space, and it's
Right.
like it's so interesting that, and simple really when you think about it, but they're enriching deep experiences that we don't have anymore.
Right.
And even when I share a reel or a video with my daughter now, and it's funny and we both laugh about it, it's not really a memory
And
anymore.
it just goes away. It's
Yeah.
ephemeral.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what you remember when you go through that stretch of road and remember is not what the song was about, but
Yeah.
about the feeling you had.
The way we
Right?
acted together.
Those are the intangibles, you
Yeah.
know, but they're powerful. They're really powerful.
So, but still, Michael, I think the challenge is, I understand. Every parent understands, but I'm guessing every parent listening to us will say, how do I stop them from doing this? The focus is, how do I get my kids to, take their eyes off the screen?
Yeah.
What would be a direct advice for that?
The first advice I give them is stop being the police and start supporting their success. So see their glass as half full, not half empty. Right? Don't punish them or scold them or, even feel frustrated with them about it. This is their reality right now.
Yeah,
And offer alternatives.
I love the idea
Right?
of alternatives.
Offer alternatives. So, for example, for video gamers, I try to suggest things that have characteristics similar to video games, like, subversive and a little bit, scary for parents. So try parkour. Right? Try, leaping around, doing gymnastics in your urban environment. And I would much rather a kid break their arm, because I can fix that, than break their spirit. And I think that's hard to fix when you break their spirit. And I see kids whose spirits are broken, at least in the moment, because they've gone down these rabbit holes and they're unending. They're echo chambers that will suck them in, and
Yeah.
as long as they let them. But to offer them other things to do, other ways to do it, and also to behave themselves in ways that they want their kids to behave.
100%.
Right.
I think that's really the bottom line, that
Right.
if your child is constantly sucked into this,
Right.
you may as well question if you're also sucked into it.
Well, if you're staring at your smartphone to that all-important email and wagging your finger at them about playing video games,
Yeah.
to them that's the height of hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. They don't care what the value of the email is. That there's at least that much value to the game they're playing.
Correct.
But put the phone down and say, "Hey, let's go outside and kick a ball around, or let's go for a walk, or have you walked the dog lately? Let's do it together." So just anything like that.
and make
They
that
want time with us.
yeah, and make that a pleasurable experience,
Absolutely.
not a chore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't tell them to turn off the video game and take the garbage out. You
Yeah.
tell them to turn off the video game and let's
go
go
have
on an
fun.
adventure.
Yeah. Do you think that the digital, we're not going to call it addiction, but attachment, syndrome that we have now is the result of loneliness, or is the lead to loneliness among young people?
Yes and yes.
Oh, okay.
And no, I mean that, in other words, I think we go to something that's easy and not demanding to feel less lonely. And because we go to that instead of going to someone else and connecting with someone, we are more lonely. So it's a vicious cycle, really, in many ways. These devices of near infinite connectivity mean that we can go anywhere in the world, see anything, connect with anybody in the world. And we choose that over being with people and developing that deep, sustaining, meaningful connectedness, which we've lost in many ways. I mean, you see kids texting each other and they're sitting right next to each other, right?
Yeah.
You know, because it's private or people don't know. And so I think that I think we have to respect ourselves and each other more, that we can get over our fear of intimacy. You know, a lot of times with kids, it's, oh my God, I'm going to seem stupid, or they're going to notice that pimple on my forehead, or they're going to, you know, I'll say something stupid. So our fear of being awkward, our fear of being seen as in some way deficient, keeps us from connecting in ways that are really meaningful. And so I say to kids, if you're thinking of connecting with someone, always upgrade by one. Instead of tweeting, text. Instead of texting, call them. Better yet, video call them. Best of all, get together in person, right? So it's not about restricting the devices. It's about upgrading to something better, something riskier, but more there, you know, and the risk actually they're trying to avoid is intimacy with another human being, because that feels you have to be open and vulnerable. And, you know, what I say to kids is, you can't make out with a smartphone.
So it's interesting that you say that. The thought that was on my mind, I don't remember who I watched recently that was talking about oxytocin and how, you know, human connection is such a necessary part of our existence. And Hannah, my wonderful wife, and I, we live an unusual, almost long-distance marriage. One, because I travel quite a bit. She's very, very committed to her practice. And so basically, if I'm traveling on certain days where she has her patients, she wouldn't change the times most of the time. I mean, she basically says, I can't tell them it's going to be a different day every week, right? And so often we are texting on WhatsApp, and suddenly upgrade by one was actually, it wasn't mentioned that way, but it's so interesting because, you know, the speaker was basically saying that if you have to be in a long distance conversation through WhatsApp or whatever, go to voice notes instead of text, because studies will show that you still get a tiny bit more oxytocin. It feels a little more like a connection.
Right.
And Hannah is so much better than me on that. So she's quite interestingly, I'd probably say 60 to 70% of her messages are voice notes. And they're wonderful, and you know, it's almost suddenly felt selfish of me to respond back in text after you recognize that. But the interesting bit is, can you upgrade even further? And maybe that's endless.
Absolutely, yeah. If they're close enough to do that, upgrade as much as you can.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. You ever save the voice notes because they're so special?
Save the Well, but by the way, this is my podcast. I ask that question. No,
okay. No. What goes around comes around, man.
No, but that's an interesting one. So one of the techie pet peeves we have with voice notes, the techies, is that you can't search for them. Oh. So I'm a huge geek. I apologize to the whole world. I know I come across as a normal person that can speak English.
Right.
I am a total geek. A total. If you see inside, it's horrifying, right? and one of the reasons why we don't like voice notes is, one, you can't hear them in a public place like this, so it delays the response.
Right.
And two, you can't search them. I know for a fact that they're going to be searchable with AI in the future, but you know, for a while. So normally I used to respond to a voice note by adding a title to it, which was very awkward. It's like, why did you write that? No, I'm just making it searchable.
Right.
But it is actually quite difficult in a conversation to go back and listen to all of them. Yeah.
Well, I will confess that my voicemail is clogged up with messages from my parents since they've both died. And this is a piece of them that I still have.
Oh my God.
Right? And if you think about it, Isn't that special? I mean,
It's incredible.
Yeah. And so it's like a little time capsule
Yeah.
where I can go back and hear my mom, hear my dad, And so
That's so incredible.
so that's a wonderful thing this technology can do.
I lost my mom 3 days ago. That's actually...
I'm sorry.
No, it's so... Because I was thinking exactly that. I mean, so I had the absolute good fortune of seeing her. I was there last week, and I spent time with her last week, and we had our last conversation, if you want. We both knew it was going to be our last conversation. And before, she was really, really suffering. And so we had to put her in an induced coma of some sort that basically, took her through the last days of her life. So I feel so peaceful that I met her for the last time before she went to sleep, if you want. But then I was thinking, because I'm working on, I'm thinking about AI and so on, in terms of how many conversations do I have with my mom that were recorded? How many? I have lots of videos of the kids running around and, there is music in the background, right? But how many conversations were recorded? I went back to, I also lost my wonderful son 10 years ago. How many conversations do I have of him? I have videos of him playing. I have, videos of us doing things together, but I don't have conversations recorded. So interesting when you really think about, and I have them, believe it or not, as per your remark, I have them in my heart, right?
Yes.
I remember those memories, but not in a digital format in any way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think I'm going to have to close down one whole phone just so I can keep those on the phone, right?
Oh my God! Can you not export them?
I've got to figure that out. I've got to figure out how to export them. But I think that's one of the special things that we can do with these devices and with these technologies is have a little piece of a little bit of oxytocin, a little bit of the cuddle hormone, they call it, right? That comes when you hear a voice of a loved one,
I actually think we're both here sharing an experience that goes for a tip. Really, is like if you have a way of creating digital memories of your loved ones, get conversations in there. Get not just their liking and their looks, but there is that. I don't know if it's age getting to us, but I saw my wonderful brother during this experience. My brother is a surgeon. He's very good at what he does. He's like really an incredible doctor because through his life, he was sort of the corrective surgeon. So when surgeries go wrong, he's the one that goes and fixes them. And so his patients have always been the most critical, if you want. And then when my mom, Habibi, when my mom started to feel sick for the last 3 months, he completely dropped off. Like he completely stopped practicing. He stopped everything. And he just literally slept in her room every single day, almost every single day of 80 days.
Wow.
Looking at every marker and every indicator and every sodium level and potassium level and I don't know what, and just constantly trying to get things right. And my brother is truly a role model for me. I mean, he is 6 years older than I am, and I've always looked up to him. But he was such a strong guy. I mean, we all knew that he had this kindest heart ever, and he's such a morally driven person. But I've never seen him cry. I've never seen him stop crying since. It seems to me that the older you become, the more you realize the value of the things that actually matter. And I think this is the challenge you and I are trying to face here, is that if 7 hours of your day are spent on a device that creates no oxytocin, creates no human connection, and creates no residual memories whatsoever, that's half of your life, literally half of your waking life gone. And then the other half we're working.
Right.
What a waste.
And the other thing it does is it removes us from each other.
Absolutely creates that
Right.
barrier.
Yeah, exactly. We need to respect and love ourselves more.
Yeah. Once again, this is such a definitive conversation for me because something I've been thinking about recently is I lost 3 people this year. It's just
Wow.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm still practicing what I preach in terms of I'm calm and contented, and I understand that death is not the end of life. So,
Right.
but I've lost 3 very, very dear people to me that I will not have the chance to interact with in this
Right.
physical format anymore.
Yeah.
And so you suddenly recognize something that is very, very eye-opening, which is it's not how many more years do I have, but how the configuration of those years is going to look like, because they're not going to have my sister, they're not going to have my son, they're not going to have my brother, and they're not going to have my mother. My dad died very early in my life, so they're also not going to have him. And suddenly you start to say, yeah, I may have many more years to live, but how many more years do I have to live with my mother around? 0. Right? And so I attempted to create, because I am such a geek, I attempted to create a system where I'm now starting to measure how many hours of my year will I be spending in the real world, and how many hours will I be spending working and writing and creating content and so on, and recording this podcast, which I believe is a human connection. But and it's quite interesting because now it's actually so eye-opening when we spoke about the non-device hours, that one should start to measure and say, with literal, like, unwavering commitment, I think one should start to measure, how many hours will I not waste today looking at a device?
Let me add another metric to that. It's not just the quantity, it's the quality.
Absolutely.
Right. And a minute is very different if it's a minute holding a loved one or a minute staring at our phone. Right? So I think we have to have those parallel metrics happening. Like, how much time am I doing this? But what is the quality of the time? In terms of what it does for me, what it does for others. And so I think we need to have that dual look at it all the time. Like, really measure what that time is like. And I think we will find the richness in the non-screen time. Which I think in some ways we don't sense as well because we're so hyper-stimulated by the screen time that we need some time, as you described, your retreats, 40 minutes the first, 20 minutes, and then maybe none. It's almost like you're weaning yourself from that stimulation.
So what do they call it? Withdrawal symptoms?
Yes, exactly. But I think that taking a moment to just feel, taking a moment to be open and vulnerable, it's wonderful if we allow ourselves the space to do that. And frankly, if we have the courage to do that.
It's the courage, for sure. It is the idea of upgrade by one. I love that concept. I mean, when I talk about Hannah, who's a wonderful addition to my life, and I say to myself I should send more voice notes, or maybe I should actually travel less. You know what I mean? It is an interesting what really matters question. And I'm, maybe on my favorite podcasts, I normally stop early because it allows my listeners to rewind and listen again. And I think the big deliverable of this conversation and this wonderful connection, thank you, Michael, is that we may not always give you the answer to how you can get off your device, but I hope we left you with a reality check on how much it matters to do that. I think if people see the value of the life that we're wasting in the digital world, maybe they will figure out a way to get there.
See the value and feel the value.
Feel, yeah.
Yeah. And we need to give ourselves the space to feel that.
I think I will close with this. It's
been hard work, and I can't talk about this stuff without getting emotional. And one of the things people ask me is how do you distance yourself from your patients?
That's an incredibly important question.
And I don't.
Oh my God.
I don't. But there's a price to pay. As I said, I feel like I've been giving soul transfusions and I'm exhausted, but I'm deeply invested in my patients' well-being, and I care about them. And one of the wonderful things about being a pediatrician is you get to sort of usher them through a really important stages of their lives, and it's such a privilege and an honor. But it's hard, and it's especially hard when you lose a young patient, And
you are such a wonderful being. You really are.
I'm still perfecting myself. I'm still working at it.
We all are, but I think your intention, your sense of humanity is just unbelievably beautiful. I wish we all could draw meaning from what we do rather than income. I think that that shows why your practice is working. It's because it's about the child. It is
absolutely.
About yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that from your work, and I really see it now that we've had this conversation.
And we get more from what we give. Right?
I don't know if I can agree with this. I mean, it is. I think we share the same thing. It's demanding sometimes to the point where you feel completely drained by it.
Yeah.
But then eventually, as you look back at your month or week or year, you go like, wow, what? Yeah. How better could I have spent my life?
Yeah. Absolutely. But we're all on a journey. We're all on a journey.
I am so grateful that you joined me today, Michael. This was truly a wonderful. You guys you could definitely not feel the energy in this room. I don't think digital devices would capture that. But I will encourage you to rewind, to listen to this one more time, because I think the core of this conversation has been that life is so precious and we're wasting it in the wrong place. And yes, we've given you some tips, some B's and some M's on things that you can do to find a path out of your device attachment. But I think what I hope we have given you today a lot more from two feeling men is that there is so much to be lost when your life is spent in the device. There is so much to be gained when it's spent connecting to someone or some part of nature that you truly adore and admire. To do that, I will go back to my same premise of creating this podcast: is slow down, find that pathway to being yourself. It doesn't matter how busy you are today. There's always a bit of time to slow down. I love you all for listening. Thank you very much for being here, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
And I will see you next time.